This is the Criterion Creeps podcast. Tonight we're talking about Fiend Without a Face from 1958, directed by Arthur Crabtree. From Letterboxd, the tagline for this film, "New horrors, mad science spawns evil fiends, taking form before your horrified eyes." And the synopsis here: an American airbase in Canada provokes resentment from the nearby residents after fallout from nuclear experiments at the base are blamed for a recent spate of disappearances. A captain from the airbase is assigned to investigate and begins to suspect that an elderly British scientist who lives near the base and conducts research in the field of mind over matter knows more than he is letting on. So, Fiend Without a Face has just been one of those movies on my radar forever and ever and ever. I knew kind of like it had this strange title. I knew it had something to do with like brain monsters that like eat your brain or something like that. I didn't know really much about it other than it had like this odd title. I knew it was 50 sci-fi, but one of the reasons why I was never really in a big rush to watch it is because 50 sci-fi can be pretty unspectacular. It can be like just there. And when you're talking about paying those Criterion Collection prices for a movie, it's like, do I really want to spend $40 US on a movie that I'll watch once in my life? Not really. But now, RJ, in 2017, or in 2018 now, we live in a world where there's like services through libraries where you can just stream movies legitimately like this. And there's also podcasts that talk about Criterion movies in order of release, which is like, well, here I am watching Fiend Without a Face for the very first time at long last. So yeah, I don't know. This movie is like pretty typical, I think, of 50s science fiction. It's kind of nice that we watched The Blob last week. We could have almost watched both these movies back to back because they would have kind of made for a good comparison and contrast of like the style of filmmaking, which would be American sci-fi and British sci-fi. Because we watched, but here we are. But so yeah, we watched. You and I actually watched another movie that we didn't talk about and what we've been creeping on, and that was Invader from Mars. And so that is also an American production. But I also watched another film called X the Unknown, which is like a unofficial like second Quatermass movie. For people who aren't familiar, there's like this cycle of movies written by Nigel Neal, who's like a big influence. He's kind of like this pseudo kind of like Lovecraft for the science era British writer who wrote like strange, weird fiction stories. Like the Quatermass was his character that he wrote, but he has a big influence on things like Prince of Darkness. John Carpenter stuff is very influenced by Nigel Neal, and this X the Unknown was like supposed to be another Quatermass movie, but Nigel Neal was like, nope, and so the movie's like very much a knockoff of it. But watching Fiend Without a Face and X the Unknown like in the same week, I was like struck by like how similar they were, and they were both British, made by different directors and everything. But it's like, oh man, these movies have the exact same vibe. Where The Blob has this like teenager vibe of young kids that are like up to no good, having fun fighting blobs in like a small town in America. In the British films, these are like adult feeling movies. They're about old people, like full on adults, and they're talking about things and trying to solve things very rationally, rather than like a lot of like, I don't believe this is actually going on. There's not a lot of that going on. It's more just like people don't realize what's going on, so it's the slow reveal of like what the menace actually is. In X the Unknown, it's a giant protoplasmic kind of blob thing that feeds off of radiation. And here with Fiend Without a Face, made a couple years later, it's about an invisible thing, which is a very cheap way of having to do a lot of effects work. And this is a thing that's also feeding off of radiation. So anyway, watching this movie, the first thing that struck me was the fact that this is taking place on a U.S. Air Force base in Manitoba, Canada, which is odd because I don't think that's a very common thing. Winthrop, whatever it's called here in this movie, is a place that does not exist in Canada. It's just a climate. It's just a northernly looking place that they filmed in Britain, and that's the setting of this. The other thing that I was thinking about watching this movie that, like, again, I thought was just okay was there's like a good comparison between these 50s movies, be it from America or from Britain, where it's about films that also entrust in the government to do right by the people, compared to the 80s, which we see in the Blob 80s sequel, is that the government is not to be trusted at all. Which I guess is like a thing that comes out of like kind of the post-Watergate mentality of questioning the government. Never trust them; they'll do bad things to you. There's like Agent Orange and stuff like that. They'll experiment on the people. You don't trust the government ever. There's like a whole bunch of like Reagan era horror movies that are just like the government is bad. So it's always like a fun. It's a fun thing, I guess, to go back and watch these 50s movies where it's like your only hope is to trust that the government will save the day because you as a citizen can't do it. There's a couple movies that kind of challenge that, like Monolith Monsters, which is about a guy who's like the sheriff, but he's like waiting for a government official to like give the okay on something, and he just does it, and then it turns out to be okay in the end. But anyway, that's kind of like my general thoughts about Fiend Without a Face before getting into any other details. RJ, you're a sci-fi guy. I know this movie doesn't have aliens in it per se, but what did you think of Fiend Without a Face?
Yeah, I was hoping it was going to be an alien flick. I didn't know too much about this. I've heard about it quite a bit. I've seen the cover quite a bit. Them brains squiggling around. Thought that was pretty cool. So we watched a bit of 50 sci-fi in the last week or two, and there was some movies I really liked, some movies I kind of liked, and then there's this one, Fiend Without a Face. I think this movie is cool. I think the first hour is kind of boring. The first hour is pretty uninteresting. Now, I don't know how it played out in the 50s, but now it's like all this kind of pseudoscience stuff, which like isn't without its charm, right? Like I do like seeing movies where they're like, oh, well, this is the kind of thing. It's like the idea of the time. And like, even though now you're like, well, that's not really how it is. But I'm not like a dink. I'm not mad at this movie for being like, well, yeah, that can't happen. So like it's cool that you see that, and there's so much of it, but the movie itself is kind of like, I guess the way you described it, where it's like adult, it's like grown up, because it's a lot of people just talking about like what's going on, which is like fine too. It's just it's not super stimulating for the first about hour, and then in the last 20 minutes. They crank this fucker up to 11, and there are like spine brains just fucking flying, man. And they're making the squishiest sounds, and it gets like ultra violent for a little while. There's dudes like axing brains into the ground, and like you shoot the brain, and then it makes this sweet bubbly squishy sound, and it's like covered in jam. And I was just like, whoa. I was like, where did this come from in this like movie that was like more concerned about like dairy production and cows and like radar, like the how far radar can go and stuff like that. So like, I think this movie is kind of a mixed bag because like it's not bad or anything like that. I just think the first hour is a little bit under. It's not super exciting, and then in the last 20 minutes there's like all this super cool brain stuff, and you're like, yeah, man, that's wicked. And like I think there's something to say about that too, where it's like they save it for the end, and then maybe it kind of has a bigger impact. One thing I was gonna say, I feel like the cover to this movie kind of blows that a little bit, where because you don't see them at all until right at the end when you see that it's like a brain and a spinal cord. And I actually think they look really cool. Yeah. But like I knew what to expect because I've seen it like on the cover so much, I guess. But I don't know. Like, okay, so it's not bad. I think it's a little bit slow in the first good 2/3, and then the last bit picks up some steam pretty good.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is like very like I'd say middle of the road as far as like the 50s sci-fi stuff I've seen. But I mean, there's not as many of those movies as you would think there are. I think like, we saw some lists the other week, and there's like 168 movies that were made, which is actually quite a lot over the course of like a decade. But a lot of that is like some real cheap stuff, and a lot of it's just like people go to space and that's it. Like there's nothing really like no cool monstery effects or anything like that. They're just movies with like here's women from Venus, and that's it. So this one's at least got some nice little monster creatures. Let's see here. Got some real hot, fresh notes off of Wikipedia.
Oh dear.
The screenplay by Herbert J. Leder was based upon Amelia Reynolds Long, 1930 short story The Thought Monster, originally published in the March 1930 issue of Weird Tales magazine. Noted science fiction personality, collector, and literary agent Forrest J. Ackerman represented mystery and science fiction pulp writer Long and brokered the sale of her story, The Thought Monster, to the film's producers. You know who Forrest J. Ackerman is, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Anyway, so screenwriter Leder was originally set to direct the film, but being American was unable to obtain a British work permit in time, so Crabtree replaced him as director. Thompson later said that when the director showed up on the first day of shooting and looked at the script, Crabtree claimed it was not the film he had been hired to direct, as he did not do monster films. So after a heated argument with producers, Crabtree left the set and did not show up for several days. In the interim, Thompson himself directed the film. So that's cool. So, I mean, that might explain sort of this weird kind of indifference that a lot of the movie has. Like, no, people didn't want to direct this movie. And it's like, how invested can you be? Because I'm sure the person who did, like, the effects work probably was super into this movie. But, I mean, it is what it is. Apparently, the reason why it was set with a Canadian setting was because it would appeal to both American and British Commonwealth movie audiences, being a British film. And it would be like, hey, look, it's a colony. Isn't this more interesting to you that this could happen in a colony?
Is that like a way to be like, look, you should care, but at the same time, don't be scared because it's not happening to you?
Yeah. One thing I didn't notice, and there's a note here, because like apparently they use a lot of they try to use expat American and Canadian actors that were living in the UK. But there were some British actors that were dubbed into American.
Yeah. How about that French Canadian accent? Since that comes up a lot on this show.
It's a real theme.
You know what I was thinking? Like I saw it was in Manitoba, and I was like, Manitoba, eh? And then like the first 10 minutes is all about cows, and I was like, cows, eh? Because it's like, apparently, so we've had two Criterion movies that have shown Canada. They've both shown cows. So I don't know if it's that or if they caught wind of our show and how we're the Criterion cows on other times. And they've retroactively added it to these films.
They special editioned it.
Yeah. But I noticed that too. But yeah, that one guy's French accent. Did you hear that one guy?
I might have glossed over it. But,
it's almost non-existent, but at the same time, he's like, know what he'll talk to you like this, and then tota. It's like he like does stuff like that, and you're like, what the fuck? Like he really tries. It's worse than GSP.
Oh. So yeah, speaking of like those during those shots of like the fields and whatnot, there's like one beat I liked about this movie was like kind of those like shots of the planes flying overhead, and it was like it's like the looming hulking war machine that just like passes you by on your everyday life, and that's the kind of world we live in now. And it's like back then it was like, wow, that's like frightening because this is like post-war UK, and it's like, oh yeah, they actually did have like, you know, loft flying overhead, bombing the shit out of them, and now it's like, oh, there's our boys. But obviously this is Canada, but same idea. Let's see here, some notes about the stop motion animation. This was an unusual practice for such a low budget science fiction thriller of the era. The director of these effects sequences was Florenz von Nordorf, while the actual stop motion was done in Munich by Nordorf's partner, German special effects artist K.L. Ruppel. Peter Nielsen headed up the British practical effects crew. see here. Ooh, this is kind of a neat one. During July 1958, Fiend Without a Face first opened in the United States at the Rialto Theater in New York City's theater district. The film's producers placed an outdoor front of the house exhibit near the sidewalk that showcased a living and breathing Fiend. In a steel-barred glass display case, it periodically moved its spinal cord tail, startling onlookers, and also made menacing sounds with the help of a concealed electrical device. The crowds that gathered to watch the caged Fiend grew so large that New York City police finally ordered the display case removed because it was creating a public disturbance.
Fucking squares.
Yeah.
That sounds super cool.
It's
Why don't people do stuff like that anymore?
Yeah. I don't know.
Actually, I think when that Warhammer movie came out, I think there was a giant hammer crushing a cab in New York. That's pretty fun.
Warcraft?
Oh, yeah, Warcraft.
Okay.
Not Warhammer. Warcraft.
5 months later, Fiend Without a Face created a public uproar after its British premiere at the Ritz Theatre in Leicester Square in London's West End. The British Board of Film Censors had demanded a number of cuts before its release and had finally granted the film an X certificate. But newspaper critics were still aghast at its horrifying special effects. Questions were actually raised in Parliament as to why British censors had allowed Fiend Without a Face to be released. Notably, what is the British film industry thinking by trying to beat Hollywood at its own game of overdosing on blood and gore? So, as you were talking about earlier, yeah, the first like hour or so of this movie is like whatever. It's very stock. You could switch it out with any other movie of its era, and you'd be like, yeah, nothing's lost other than like lady in a bath towel, which they really like. They make sure that's on the movie poster. They really want you to know, hey, this lady, she's gonna be coming out of the shower wearing this robe. Just this towel, and that's Kim Parker.
Sexy
Kim Parker, fine looking lady. She's also in another sci-fi movie called Fire Maidens of Outer Space.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah, and that's a movie about like women from Atlantis on the 13th moon of Jupiter.
Fuck, that sounds awesome. We should have watched that movie.
Yeah, well, Criterion hasn't delivered on it yet. So yeah, there's that. There's this one note here that I'm like, I can't remember what it was. That Gibbons whale, man. So there's like, is there a bit with a monkey or a guy?
No?
Is there a guy? There's like a weird part in this movie where a guy just gives out this weird scream, and it's like, what the fuck? It's like the weirdest sounding whale.
Is that like when the guy gets hit by the brain, right?
Maybe. So, I don't even remember what that note was. I watched this movie like almost a week ago, and I've watched so many movies in between. I'm like, what even was that scene?
I didn't watch it too long ago. I don't really remember.
Here's a note. I guarantee you there's no such European-looking cryptid in a Manitoba graveyard like there is in this movie.
Oh, fuck off. Who said that?
Me. There's no.
Come on.
There's a bit where like, yeah, so our generic leading man guy, he goes down to this crypt, and I was just watching it, and I was like, wait, this movie's set in fucking Manitoba. It's like there's no way they fucking built this like in the frozen ground of fucking Manitoba. And it's just like elaborate because it looks exactly like this is like Europe or whatever. It's like no, they did not build this here. Like it's.
Jarrett's because they were looking for a mental vampire. Did you forget? Did you forget that little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, I also really like, now that I'm on it, where they're like talking about the science of what happened to these people. And they're like, their entire brain and spinal cord are gone. They're like, it's just gone. And it's like, what? Because they're like, there's no marks on them except for one little hole in the back of the neck.
So, I mean, it's pretty ingenious and cheap as fuck to make your like monsters invisible for most of the runtime, and then all you're doing is like, all right, clutch your head in pain, and they go like anyone could do that. It's fantastic. Yeah,
it's good, but then it's like we're saying, the last 10, 20 minutes, there's like so much work put into the actual monsters, so. Well, not like work, but it looks cool, man. Like with the brains climbing the trees and jumping at people.
The big siege at the end where they're just like taking axes to the brains and just blowing up brains and shooting them up. Yeah, it's like really pretty cool. That's like the only thing worth recommending about this movie is like the final 10 minutes. That big, the big action scene there.
I agree,
because the rest of it's very much a slow burn, and there's like no great cinematography. There's not a great score, other than a really cool title in the last 10 minutes. It's just kind of there. Yeah, that's
I
about it.
agree.
And yeah, I said a note here. Hey, RJ, how does the science hold up in this movie? Because I suspect it's specious at best.
Well, Jarrett, as a individual who holds a master's degree in neuroscience,
Mhm.
and in case you were wondering, that means brain science. This movie is almost 100% accurate.
Yeah,
Like
our brains really that delicious?
they are, and there's a reason why we study them to harness their sheer savory goodness. But yeah, you can liquefy it and just suck it out through a hole in your neck, like whatever. It's not like the spinal cord is attached to like every nerve in your body. No big deal.
Another note, since we were talking about remakes last week with The Blob that has not yet materialized.
Yeah.
On March 22nd, 2010, Roy Frumkes confirmed to Fangoria magazine that he planned to produce a remake of the film in 2011. So Roy Frumkes, his biggest claim to fame is he did the Dawn of the Dead, or it's like the big documentary on George Romero called Document of the Dead that he filmed while doing Dawn of the Dead. So, I mean, okay, so a documentary filmmaker really likes this movie and wants to remake it. Sure. Why not? The online website Dread Central offered an October 2013 update from Frumkes on his Fiend Without a Face remake. I've wanted to do this film for 40 years, so I already had it all in my head, and it wasn't hard to write. What I didn't have was the technical information. I'm no science buff. Now I'm interviewing scientists, getting the technology straight. It's set in a think tank in the Berkshires, and it's not about young people. It's a mature film, but it has a street trash sensibility, so the people who like my work will not be disappointed. The website also posted a still from a fundraising trailer that Frumkes had shot for the remake with director Franco Frasetti. As of December 2017, that remake has yet to materialize.
What is he? I want to know what scientists he's hanging out with to get the real science, because that's the fucking job I've been looking for, man.
Yeah, you'll be the Fiend Without a Face consultant.
Yeah, I'll be like, listen, man, brains are spooky. Let's spook this shit up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what my degree was in, Jarrett. Spooking up brains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, who hates Fiend Without a Face? I don't know if it's a movie that's like worth hating, but
I'm sure there's some asshole who hates this thing.
Cosmic Sentry, 1.5 star. Just some 50s B movie madness. Nothing to see here. Move along.
Sure.
Andy, 2 stars. This is on Criterion. Why? Too much bland filler. Not enough killer brain. C-. I don't know if Andy understands how C-minuses work, because that's still a passing grade, and 2 stars is not.
You know what I fucking hate about Letterboxd now that we're on it?
Yeah.
People who give number ratings and letter ratings. It's like, why give it both? Because it's either the same thing, or it's either whatever letter grade you give it is the same as the number grade you're giving it, or it's different. And it's like, if it's the same, you're being redundant, and if it's different, why have both of them? Just do one.
Right.
Fucking ratings are stupid.
They kind of are.
Keep going though. I
got one. Another irregular hater, Ben DeBono. 2 stars. The last 15 minutes with the creature is really entertaining. The first hour when they're invisible is dull as watching paint dry. I wouldn't go that far, but
no.
You know,
I mean, it's fine. It's not like super exciting, but I wasn't like remember we were talking about Qui-Gon, and I was talking about how for the last like half hour I was just staring at the ceiling.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing that in this movie.
Yeah.
So it's boring, but like whatever. At least at the end you get cool brains.
Mm-hmm. I'll read one who loves this movie. This movie's only 5-star review.
Nice.
5 stars. Ronnie Boy 1776. Watched this during their October movie watching. Finally saw this classic, loaded with drive-in wonderfulness, the sci-fi horror flick that combines telekinesis, nuclear fear, and creature feature madness has to be one of the best schlocky 50s horror flicks I've ever seen. The only drawbacks is the, everything worked out perfectly tone of the last minute or two of the flick, but this is compensated for by the absolute best 1950s sequence of gore that I've ever seen.
Well, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's like...
I do like those squishy brains. They're pretty cool.
Yeah. I'd have to go back and see what are like the gory movies of the 50s to see how this one compares. It would definitely be in the list just for that little bit. There's that one, but I think it's from 1960 or maybe 1959, that Eyes Without a Face that you so desperately want to watch.
Well, whatever, man. That's not even the worst like thing I've ever done, dude.
So as I alluded to a few times here on the last couple of weeks, RJ was very excited that he was finally going to be able to watch Eyes Without a Face this week. But at some point, and I was like, we're watching a movie called Fiend without a brain, right? Or without a face, right? Without brain. You're like, what? Really? And I was like, yes. And you're like, you were really kind of disappointed.
Well, I bought that fucking movie like 3 years ago. And then when we started doing this podcast, I was like, all right, well, I'll watch it. It's not that far in the Criterion. But I think it's like 200 maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's a ways away.
Whatever, Jarrett.
You could just watch it.
No. I don't want to rewatch it. I want to watch it once for the show.
Okay.
You see what he's like to me, people? For one time I get excited to do this show that just brings so much pain to both of us. The one time I get excited and he just shits all over me.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk to all my friends, they all be like, "Yep, that's Jarrett." That's
Jarrett.
Pretty accurate.
Just shits all over everybody.
Yep, like a cow.
Like a cow.
Yeah.
Very good.
Any other final thoughts here on this Fiend Without a Face?
Not really. I mean, it's fine.
Did you want to talk at all about Invaders from Mars?
I realized we didn't talk about it. I liked Invaders from Mars a lot more than this. I thought Invaders from Mars was actually pretty good. I liked having like the kid who, like, he was smart, and it wasn't that adults didn't. Well, they didn't like the doctor believed him. And then I did like how in that one, like, the adults actually did come to grips with it. They're like, oh, shit, there is spacemen. Let's go get them bastards. They must be from Russia. I thought it was cool, man. I like the idea of all the people walking to the hill and falling in the hole. And, I thought that was, like, nice.
And the mutants.
The mutants. Mutants.
Yeah, that's it.
The brain thing was really cool, and the mutants. I thought they were cool too. So, Invaders from Mars was good. The only thing I didn't like was the last 5 minutes they do a playback of the entire movie, and you're just like, come on.
Well, we all knew it was heading toward, and it was all just a dream. And that's like the worst shit ever. And that was like a real common thing that they did in like the 40s and 50s. Because I just watched a movie last night, RJ, that had the exact same thing. And I was like, oh, come on.
Hey, you know what? Just to change the subject for a second. you know that Avengers movie that's coming out next year?
Infinity
War?
Yeah.
I have a feeling you never watched Doctor Strange, but there's like the time gem is in there and they like reset time a bunch. I have a feeling, Jared, I'm calling it now, that movie they're gonna like be killing people and everyone's gonna be like, oh shit, Marvel finally got balls, like DC had years ago, and then it'll end and then it'll get reset and they'll be like, it was all a dream.
Yeah, well, they have to get to the classic shot of Thanos standing over everybody's fallen body with a Spider-Man in his arm, like, or in his hand by the throat.
Yeah, then it'll all be a dream.
Yep. And then who cares? So Invaders from Mars, it's like, I don't know. I was like pretty like getting tired by the end of that movie. It's very wonkily paced. There's like some interesting things visually in that movie. Like it feels like a children's book version of reality where like they go to like the police station and like the walls are blank. There's like nothing on the walls. It's just like empty spaces and characters just sitting at desks. The way that like if you asked a kid to describe the world, it would look exactly the way that a child would describe it. Very like just stripped down, which is interesting. But I don't know. It's a lot of setup, just like this movie too, where it's like, okay, there's like something going on. There's actually some good stuff. The stuff with the dad when he like has obviously been like taken over by the aliens. He just turns into this real fucking 50s asshole dad, and that stuff is that
he's
was
backhanding kids. He's telling women to go shut up and do the cooking.
Mm-hmm.
It's fucking nuts, man.
It's what we call the good old days.
See, he said it. He said it, you guys, not me.
But yeah, no. Then yeah, the green head at the end is like neat, but it doesn't really do much. He just kind of he looks at things. He looks at people. I guess now you'll have to watch the Tobe Hooper remake.
I will next Halloween.
Okay.
Although I hate Tobe Hooper.
Yeah.
I'll admit curiosity got the best of me, and I pulled up the page to his movie, and I saw the giant brains, or whatever the giant brain is, and I was like, ooh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check that out.
Aliens, RJ.
Aliens, man. They're the coolest.
Well, I hope that you continue watching more 50s sci-fi movies in the coming weeks.
I think I will.
And I will continue. I'll be watching film noirs because that's what I do in January now, I guess. I'll talk about those next week. I think that's it for now, though. After the break, I'm going to drink RJ's brain and spine out his neck with a straw.
You were going to say butt.
No.
Yeah, well, I got news for you, buddy. Better men have tried.
Yeah, no to felching, sir.